Hello everyone, today I'll continue telling you the story of the single mother, Tiểu San. I hope you enjoy the video. Ever since Hai brought Tiểu San home, the house that once brimmed with laughter had turned quiet, like a corner of the sky that had been forgotten. Hai tried to keep everything exactly the way it used to be, the pillow she liked to hug, the floral curtains she loved, even the small picture frames neatly placed on the shelf. He hoped that those familiar traces would awaken the memories sleeping inside her. But nothing was as easy as he wished. Every night, while Hai was reading or working, he would hear a soft startled gasp from the bedroom. Tiểu San often jolted awake, breathing rapidly, sweat beading on her forehead, her eyes filled with panic as if she had just escaped some dark past she herself couldn't fully reach. And whenever Hai turned on the light and walked in, she would instinctively shrink back, as if afraid someone might scold or hurt her. In those moments, Hai's heart felt like it was being squeezed. He would sit gently at the edge of the bed and speak in a low, steady voice. "San, it's me. You're okay. You're safe now." But even with him, someone she once loved so deeply, there were times she looked at Hai as if he were a stranger she wasn't ready to trust. Her memories, torn between past and present, left her stumbling between fear and confusion. Hai loved her so much that there were moments he could only stand outside her door, fists clenched in helplessness. He could care for her, cook her favorite dishes, tell her stories of their past. But he couldn't force her heart to remember. Hai and Hung visited often. They would sit with her for hours, recounting the smallest, warmest memories, shared meals, times the three of them laughed until their stomachs hurt, nights when San cried from exhaustion then smiled again after being held by the people who loved her. Sometimes, in the middle of Hai's stories, Tiểu San would suddenly freeze, as if a tiny spark of memory had flashed by before disappearing again. Everyone hoped, but they also knew, memories can't be dragged back by tears or words. They need time. Hung watched Tiểu San grow thinner each day, her eyes constantly tired and red from sleepless nights, and his heart ached as if his own sister were wandering through a world with no one to guide her. Hai could only sit beside her, holding her hand for a long time, whispering, "It's okay, San, little by little you'll remember. We're always right here." And Hai, every time he saw her struggling to find herself among the chaos in her mind, he felt his heart tighten painfully. He changed his work shifts, woke up early to make breakfast, prepared mild sleeping aids, lit essential oils each night, everything he could possibly do, he did. But some nights, he still sighed quietly in the dark. If only her heart could remember him before her mind did. If only she would look at him once more the way she used to. Hai knew he couldn't rush anything. All he could do was stay by her side, become the anchor that, even if she got lost, she would one day find her way back to. In the days after bringing her home, Hai rearranged his entire schedule. Every morning he woke up earlier to cook breakfast, warm a cup of milk for her, then gently wake Ivy to get ready for school. Ivy, who used to be playful and loud, became unusually gentle after seeing how easily Mommy San got startled. At noon, whenever possible, Hai would come home to check how much she had eaten. In the evenings, he devoted all his time to caring for her and Ivy, cooking, talking, reading Ivy a bedtime story, then checking on San to see if she could sleep. Some nights she dozed off for a moment only to jolt awake again, lips trembling as she called out someone from her wounded past. All Hai could do was sit beside her and pat her shoulder softly. "San, you're safe. I'm here. Ivy's here too." Each time, she looked at him with hazy eyes, unable to say a word, only nodding slightly, like a child trying to trust the hand holding her. On the days Hai's mother visited, the atmosphere in the house felt lighter. Mrs. Thoa always brought fruits or dishes San used to love, then sat across from her with a warm smile. "San, try this. You used to love this so much." Tiểu San was shy, but the gentleness in the older woman's eyes made her nod. Once, after taking a bite, she murmured softly, I remember this taste." Hai felt something tighten in his chest. Just a little, only a tiny flicker, but it meant her memories still existed somewhere. Mrs. Thoa never pressured her. She simply talked about small, peaceful things, the times the family wrapped rice cakes together, afternoons taking Ivy to the park, tiny everyday memories full of calm and warmth. And the more San listened, the less cold her heart felt, like someone was soothing her hidden wounds with quiet sincerity. Ivy clung to her even more. Every afternoon, she ran into the room, peeking inside with a grin. "Mommy San, do you remember me yet? I drew a picture for you." San hesitantly accepted the drawing, 3 tiny stick figures, a woman with long hair, a man with short hair, and a little girl in a dress. Ivy giggled proudly. "This is our family. Daddy Hai, Mommy San, and me." San stared at the drawing longer than usual. Something inside her trembled softly, warm, familiar. To keep her from feeling lonely, Hai always tried to create a homely atmosphere each night, watching TV together, cutting fruits, or just quietly sitting side by side. He never pushed her to talk, remember, or try harder. He did only one thing. He stayed. One evening during dinner, the warm yellow light reflected on San's face, and she found herself staring at Hai longer than she meant to. Not out of awkwardness, but because something about him felt known. Hai caught that look, his heart melting, yet he only smiled gently. "If you don't like this dish, I'll cook another." San shook her head softly. "No, this is good." It was a tiny sentence, but to Hai, it was enormous hope. Her memories were still tangled, her past still haunted her. But with Hai's love, Ivy's warmth, and Mrs. Thoa's sincerity, Tieu San was slowly opening her heart again, slowly, but genuinely. And Hai believed that someday she would finally realize. The place her heart always returned to was him. That night, Hai's house sank into a deep silence. Ivy had fallen asleep early, hugging the small teddy bear that Mommy San once bought for her. Hai remained in the living room, the warm yellow light casting fatigue across his face after so many sleepless nights. He was just about to stand up and head to bed when he heard a faint sound from Tieu San's room. At first, it was only a broken breath. Then came a soft, trembling sob, like someone fighting against an invisible force. Hai immediately hurried over. When he pushed the door open, the sight before him made his heart twist painfully. Tieu San was curled up, gripping the blanket tightly, her face filled with terror as if trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Her eyelids twitched, her lips trembled, and tears streamed silently onto her pillow. And then, between her gasping breaths, she choked out a faint call. "Hai, don't go." Hai froze. His whole body went still. This was the first time since she woke up that she had called his name. Not a vague "you." Not the distant look of a stranger. But Hai, the man who lived in the happiest part of her memories. He moved to her side instantly, sat at the edge of the bed, and gently held her trembling hand. "I'm here, San. I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes were still closed, but the moment she heard his voice, her breathing slowed. The hand in his gradually relaxed, as if she had finally found an anchor in her chaotic dream. A little while later, she opened her eyes. They were still clouded with tears, fragile, unfocused, like a child just pulled back from the edge of a cliff. Hai leaned in and wiped her tears, his voice soft as the night breeze. "What did you dream about? Was it a nightmare?" It took a few seconds before she could answer. She lifted a hand to her face, her voice trembling. "I saw myself somewhere. Someone said they were going to take me away. I was so scared. Then I heard you, so I called." Hai held her hand gently, as though holding something precious. "San, you called my name. In your sleep." Her lashes fluttered slowly, as if trying to understand the weight of what he said. A flicker of confusion crossed her eyes, but beneath it was something else, familiarity. "I called you?" "Yes." Hai nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. For the first time since she woke up. A long silence settled between them. But it wasn't heavy. It was gentle, like their hearts were meeting somewhere between the present and the past. Tieu San looked down at their joined hands, then slowly tightened her grip. Just a tiny motion, but it made Hai nearly forget how to breathe. I'm sorry for worrying you. Don't apologize. As long as you know I'm here, that's enough. Hai helped her lie back down, pulled the blanket over her, and stayed beside her until she fell asleep again, this time with a calmer face, no longer haunted by sudden jolts or silent fear. And all night long, he didn't leave her room. He sat in the chair beside her bed, eyes reflecting the kind of hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel for a long time. Because tonight, Tieu San had called his name. A small door, of memory, and of her heart, had finally cracked open. The next morning, when the first sunlight seeped through the curtains, Tieu San woke with a strange feeling inside her, not as heavy as usual, yet not entirely light either. Like a thin thread tugging her back to the moment from last night. She remembered Hai's warm hand. His low, gentle voice, soft enough to soothe even the deepest wounds. And most of all, the fact that she had called him. When she stepped out of the room, she paused at the doorway. Hai was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, making breakfast for Ivy. Every movement was careful, steady, full of the quiet responsibility of someone used to taking care of others. And strangely, watching him like that made her heart tremble. Not with unfamiliarity, but with something warm. Something known. When Hai turned around and saw her, he blinked in surprise, then gave her a soft smile, the kind that warmed the room instantly. You're up? I made oatmeal for you. It used to be your favorite. Tieu San lowered her head, her cheeks flushing for reasons she couldn't explain. Thank you. Just one simple line, but her voice was softer than on any day before, no longer cold or distant. Hai noticed it, but said nothing. He simply cherished it in silence. During breakfast, Ivy chattered nonstop about school, and Tieu San found herself smiling, an actual smile, lingering and genuine instead of forced. Seeing that, Ivy squealed. Daddy Hai. See? I told you Mommy San loves me. Mommy San remembers me, right? Tieu San stiffened. But the moment she looked into Ivy's bright eyes, her heart softened again. She placed a hand on the child's head and whispered. I don't remember everything, but I do love you. Ivy hugged her tightly like a kitten finding safety, and Hai had to turn away to hide the redness in his eyes. He grabbed a dish to wash, but his hands trembled from emotion. In the afternoon, Hai suggested they go for a walk near the house to get some fresh air. She agreed, something she had always refused before due to fear of crowds. They walked side by side, not talking much, but her steps were steadier now, less anxious. At one point, Hai instinctively reached out to steady her as they stepped down a ledge. The moment lasted only a second. But it made Tieu San freeze. His hand, warm, steady, gentle, sent her heartbeat stumbling. Are you okay? Hai asked softly. She shook her head, eyes still fixed on his hand. It just feels familiar. Hai stopped walking and looked at her for a long moment. San, even if your mind can't remember, your heart still knows who I am. Her lips trembled. A delicate, almost invisible flutter stirred in her chest. She didn't remember their past, didn't recall the things they lived through. But every time she was beside Hai, she felt safe. Warm. Protected. Feelings that didn't come from memory, but from emotion. When they got home, she found herself watching Hai more often. Not with suspicion, but with a quiet, curious desire to understand him, and to trust him. Later that night, just before going into her room, she called out to him. Hai, if I forget too many things, will you be sad, or disappointed? He stepped closer, laying a gentle hand on her shoulder. I'm not waiting for you to remember me. I'm waiting for you to come back to yourself. If you choose to walk toward me, even little by little, that's more than enough. A moment of silence. And then, for the first time since the accident, Tieu San smiled at him softly. I will try. Hai felt his chest tighten with happiness. I'm right here. And in that moment, her memories still incomplete, But her heart had begun to return. One late afternoon, light rain drizzled outside. The sky was gray but gentle, and the quiet inside Hai's house was so deep that you could hear each raindrop hitting the porch roof. Hai was in the kitchen cooking dinner, while Tieu San sat at the dining table, absent-mindedly turning a small stainless steel spoon in her hand. Her mind felt strange today, like something was trying to rise from deep inside her, waiting for the right moment to burst through. When Hai brought the pot of soup to the table, its aroma filled the entire kitchen. Tieu San closed her eyes and inhaled. And suddenly, a flash of memory struck her. She saw herself standing in this very kitchen. She saw Hai wiping flour off her cheek. She saw him smiling, his warm, deep voice teasing. "San, you spilled the flour again." She could even see the beam of light from the window falling across his face, and she could hear her own laughter, bright, carefree, untouched by sadness. "San? What's wrong?" Hai set the pot down quickly, his voice full of worry. Tieu San opened her eyes and drew in a sharp breath. Her hand trembled slightly. I just saw," she pressed her fingers lightly against her temple. In the kitchen, you were wiping flour off my face." Hai froze for a few seconds. That wasn't an invented image. It was real. "San, that was your first time learning to bake with me," Hai said softly, his eyes beginning to redden. "You laughed the whole day." Tieu San looked at him, and tears began to well up. That evening, the memories didn't stop. They slowly unfolded, layer by layer, piece by piece, like a door that had long been shut beginning to open after many days of darkness. When Hai placed the bowl of soup before her, another memory surfaced. This time, it was on the pedestrian bridge at the end of the street. The wind blew gently, lifting her hair. Hai draped his jacket over her shoulders, then held her hand tightly. "If you're cold, tell me. Don't suffer alone." The words replayed in her mind so clearly that she had to press a hand against her chest. Her heart was racing, not from fear, but from something incredibly tender. Seeing her silent for too long, Hai sat across from her. "San, do you remember anything else?" She didn't answer right away. But her eyes began to shimmer. "I remember loving you." It wasn't a long sentence. It wasn't a complete memory. But it was the truest thing from deep inside her. Hai sat stunned, his eyes widening before softening with emotion. He reached out, slowly, afraid to frighten her. But when his fingertips touched her hand, Tieu San reached out and held him first. "I remember this feeling," she whispered through trembling breaths. "The feeling of holding your hand, the peace it gave me. I thought it was only a dream, but now I know, it was real." Hai couldn't hold back anymore. He pulled his chair closer, gripping her hand as if afraid she would disappear. "San, you really remember. You're really starting to remember." Tears fell down her cheeks. But they were tears of relief. Memories that once frightened her were slowly turning into light. Because among all the painful shadows, the beautiful memories with Hai were returning first, guiding her back to where her heart belonged. "I also remember, that day, we stood in the rain," she whispered. "You held the umbrella for me. You said, no matter what happened, you would never let go of my hand." Hai squeezed her hand tighter, his voice breaking. "I never let go. Not even when you forgot me." At that moment, Tieu San leaned her head onto his shoulder, for the first time since the accident. His warmth, his scent, the rhythm of his heartbeat, everything felt so familiar that her own heart trembled. "I want to remember everything. I'll go with you. Step by step, little by little. I trust you." And when Hai wrapped his arm around her, she hugged him back, without hesitation, without fear. Because at long last, the most beautiful memory had returned. And so had the man she loved most. That night, the air outside was strangely gentle. A soft breeze drifted through the window, making the curtains sway lightly. In the small kitchen, where the warm yellow light softened everything it touched, two people sat facing each other, one who had just found herself again, and one who had been waiting for that moment with all the faith he had. Tieu San looked into Hai's eyes for a long time. Those eyes, she used to see them every day. The eyes that once made her believe there was someone in this world patient enough to love her with his whole heart. And now, as the fog of confusion slowly cleared, clarity washed over her so strongly it left her breathless. "Hai," she whispered, voice trembling like a breath. "I remember now." Hai froze. His entire body seemed to stop in that single fragile moment. "San, what did you say?" His voice shook uncontrollably. Tieu San lifted a hand to her chest, where her heart was pounding wildly from emotion. "I remember you. I remember everything. I remember the way you looked at me, the way you held my hand, our first hug, and the times I cried, and you pulled me into your arms." Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. But they were tears of relief, not fear. She whispered, releasing all the emotions she had been suppressing for so long. "Hai, how could I ever forget someone like you? How could I forget the most important person in my life?" Hai couldn't hold himself together anymore. He stood up so quickly that his chair slid back, and in the next second he was by her side, wrapping his arms tightly around her as if afraid that letting go would make her vanish. "San, thank you for coming back to me," his voice broke completely. Tieu San clung to him. This hug had no hesitation, no distance. It was the embrace of someone who had finally found where she belonged after being lost for so long. "I'm sorry," she murmured through her trembling breaths. "I'm sorry for forgetting you for so long, sorry for making you worry." Hai shook his head, pressing his face gently to her shoulder. "No, you never need to apologize. I was just scared you'd never come back, scared you'd keep looking at me like a stranger." Tieu San squeezed his hand, her touch answering more clearly than words. "No. I'm here now. And I remember you. Every part of you." They stood like that for a long time. Not speaking. Just holding each other. Letting their hearts say what words never could. In that moment, Hai understood one thing. Every effort, every sleepless night, every painful day watching her afraid, was all worth it. And Tieu San finally felt again the invisible thread connecting her to Hai, something she had lost, now returned stronger than any memory. When they finally pulled back, their eyes were red, but their smiles shone brighter than all the lights in the little house. "Hai," she whispered, steadier now. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Hai took a deep breath, repeating the words she once heard in a distant memory. "I told you, no matter what happens, I won't let go of your hand." This time, Tieu San smiled through her tears. "And I won't let go of you either." Outside, the rain had stopped. The night sky was peaceful. As if the whole world was quietly smiling as two hearts finally found their way back to each other. That evening, when the whole house glowed under the warm lights, Tieu San stepped out of her room feeling completely different from the days before. She no longer walked slowly in unease, no longer looked at everything as if it were unfamiliar. Instead, every little thing, the curtains, the sofa, the vase of lilies Hai always replaced for her, made her heart flutter softly. Hai was sitting on the floor playing blocks with Ivy. In the gentle light, he looked so calm, so quietly warm, she couldn't take her eyes off him. And Ivy, her bright little eyes sparkled with childish joy as she built a tiny wooden house. When Tieu San came closer, Ivy's face lit up instantly. "Mommy San. You're coming to play with me?" Tieu San chuckled softly, a real smile, warm and gentle. "Yes, Mommy will play with you." Ivy immediately ran to hug her waist, arms wrapping tight as if afraid Mommy San might disappear again. Tieu San knelt down to hug her, breathing in the familiar scent of children's soap. She closed her eyes for a moment, and in that moment, she felt clearly, she remembered, and she belonged here. From where he sat, Hai watched them, a smile forming on his lips, one he had waited so long to see. "San, come sit with me and Ivy," he asked, his voice hopeful yet unusually soft. Tieu San nodded and sat beside him. The moment she settled down, Ivy snuggled between them but deliberately leaned so that Mommy San's hand touched Daddy Hai's. At that exact moment, Tieu San looked at Hai. No more fear. No more distance. Only a look that said, I'm truly back. Hai didn't speak. He only reached for her hand carefully, as if afraid she might withdraw. But Tieu San squeezed his hand first. The three of them sat together, placing wooden blocks on top of each other to build their little house. Ivy was so excited she couldn't sit still, running to grab more toys, laughing loudly. Daddy Hai, Mommy San. I'm making the 3rd floor. Tieu San laughed softly. Hai looked at her, and his chest tightened with happiness. A while later, Ivy grew sleepy and crawled into Tieu San's lap. Mommy San, will you hold me while I sleep? That simple request made Tieu San's eyes sting with emotion. She picked Ivy up and held her the way she used to. Ivy instantly rested her head on her shoulder, her little arms wrapping around her neck, no longer uncertain like in the old days, but full of trust and affection. Hai sat close beside her, his hand resting gently on Tieu San's back and on Ivy's, as if embracing both of them. Tieu San leaned her head on Hai's shoulder, breathing in sync with his heartbeat. She whispered, her voice soft and trembling. This, really is my home. Hai froze, overwhelmed. He couldn't say anything. He simply pulled both of them closer, holding them as if he were holding his entire world. The three of them. A man who had waited with unwavering devotion. A woman who had once lost herself. And a child who longed for Mommy San's arms. Sat together, clinging to one another as if making up for all the lost days. For the first time since the accident, their little family felt whole again. And in that very moment, Tieu San knew one thing for sure. Even if her memories had once faded, her heart had never truly left this place.
Xin chào mọi người, rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong video của mình. Chúc mọi người có một ngày mới vui vẻ và một ngày làm việc tràn đầy năng lượng. Hy vọng rằng những video của mình sẽ mang đến niềm vui nhỏ cho mọi người trong cuộc sống. Câu chuyện hôm nay mình kể về Lý Tiểu San. Sau khi Tiểu San mất trí nhớ, nhờ có sự chăm sóc của Hải và sự giúp đỡ của mẹ Hải thì Tiểu San đã lấy lại trí nhớ, và Tiểu San và Hải đoàn tụ trong hạnh phúc cùng với bé Ivy. Tiếp theo thì cuộc sống của Tiểu San sẽ thay đổi như thế nào, và liệu hai người có tiến tới hôn nhân hay không thì mời mọi người cùng đón chờ ở video tiếp theo nha. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video hôm nay và ủng hộ kênh của mình trong suốt thời gian vừa qua. Hy vọng sẽ được đồng hành cùng mọi người trong thời gian sắp tới, và hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở video tiếp theo nha.